Okay, so we do have an update to a story that we talked about yesterday. Spotify chose to keep Joe Rogan's podcast after Neil Young gave them an ultimatum. Neil Young's music, including his hits like Harvest Moon, are off the world's #1 streaming platform. You could not listen to them anymore. Neil asked Spotify to remove his content because he said Joe Rogan's podcast was, quote, spreading fake information about vaccines, potentially causing death to those who believe this disinformation. Now, in a statement, Spotify said, we want all the world's music and audio content to be available to Spotify users. With that comes great responsibility in balancing both safety for listeners and freedom for creators. Okay, so Jeff, who decides what's misinformation or not? How do you think Spotify came to this conclusion?
That's a great question. What's misinformation and what's wrong information, right? I think there's two different sides to that, isn't there?
It's two different
things,
yeah.
right?
Well,
Wrong
there might be two different sides politically, but then if you ask the medical community, they're going to say there's only one side based on data.
Well, no, but it's different because, like you said, Jeff, disinformation is when you know what you're saying is wrong and you're intentionally saying it. Misinformation is like, oh, the party's Saturday, but it's Friday. I'm giving misinformation, but I'm not doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
So, like, there is a difference. So, good.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Right, yeah.
What I want to talk about is Spotify, right? And I think as a company, they are #1 streaming service in the world because of Joe Rogan, not because of Neil Young. And I don't think you bring ethics into billion-dollar decisions, even though you should. At some point, when you're making that much money, you have to go where the money is. And I think people are tuned into Spotify for Joe Rogan. If you want Neil Young, you could go anywhere you want. I don't think Neil Young cares that he's off Spotify. It's not monetary to him. He's Neil Young, right? He's trying to make a point, and he made his point, right? His point got across. I like Neil Young, like I said, not all of his songs. I like Joe Rogan, not all of his songs, as we will talk about shortly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, I think for Spotify specifically as a company, they had to make, if you put up an ultimatum, expect that back, right?
Interesting. And you brought up that we're going to talk about something a little bit later. So let's just dive into it, because I know that a lot of our very own viewers have something to say about this next topic. Speaking of Joe Rogan, he's coming under fire for another recent podcast of his, where he shared a very controversial take on the term black. Here's what Rogan had to say.
The black and white thing is so strange because the shades are so
tan and brown.
There's such a spectrum of shades of people. Unless you're talking to someone who is like 100% African from the darkest place where they're not wearing any clothes all day and they've developed all that melanin to protect themselves from the sun. You know, even the term black is weird. And when you use it for people that are literally my color, it becomes very strange.
Al?
I have a couple things to say, and I'm glad we have a little while to unpack this. You know, Erica, as I listened to that, it sounded like, because I listened to it this morning, I promised myself in 2022 I was not going to just go off of clips. I was going to try and listen to most of it. It's 4 hours. I got to about 2.5 hours of it. And most of it made what he just said make sense in that it was men talking about things that they don't know for an extended amount of time. This just happened to be another topic about something they know nothing about. My grandmother had a complexion closer to Jeff's and an eye color closer to Tori. Just blue eyes, white skin, blonde hair. She was born in Mississippi in the 1920s, 30s. I would argue to say that she had a black experience, and that did not have to do with her skin color, because we all know that the black experience has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with this country. I've been to Europe 24 times, and they don't talk about white and black over there. There's African. There's German. 2 German guys just walked in. Oh, I hung out with these 3 Irish guys last night. They don't talk about black and white because black and white is a concept that is germane to this country. So we have to be honest about this conversation. That conversation to me stunk of dishonesty. It was cowardice in that if you're going to talk about it, go there. We go there. Say what you want about DBL. I'll toot our own horn. We have some serious, uncomfortable, possibly career-altering conversations on this show on live TV. We're not a podcast. So if you're going to have that conversation, go ahead and have it, but don't have this juvenile, tangential conversation over here that should be happening at a Crayola factory about what color certain things are. This has nothing to do with color, and I should hope that they knew that it didn't, Erica, because that would be almost scarier than the conversation we just heard.
Well, Al, I'm glad you shared about things that you will and will not be doing in 2022. My experience for what I will not be doing in 2022 is explaining to people what Black means and the Black experience. It is exhausting, it's super problematic, and if you don't know by now, I don't know how to help you. I mean, this conversation was problematic at best. It was racist at worst. I honestly, for two people who are not Black in any shade or capacity to sit here and dissect, and the way it was done, like, you don't, I have a lot of African friends who are like, I'm not Black, I'm Nigerian. You know, like, they're very specific about who they are and where they come from. And then also just the idea of African people are constantly talking about what it means to be from a specific country in Africa, because we constantly are bombarded with these conversations and this imagery that these are undeveloped nations that they're coming from. And that is simply not the truth. For Joe Rogan to put it in that way, like, we were on our morning call, and I'll just be like, pull the curtain. I fell off the treadmill when our producer read that statement. And I too went back and listened to the podcast because I really wanted to understand the context, but I couldn't quite get past two white men saying that a Black man is not Black and then dissecting what it means to be Black. It was just, it's 2022, and I'm not going to explain it to you. We had the conversation about Neil Young, Spotify, Joe Rogan. Spotify made the decision to side where the money resides. That is, period, point blank.
Erica, I want to show you, and I'm sure you and Al have seen this before, but I would love our viewers to see what Trevor Noah's take on what Joe Rogan said. Take a look. This is what he said last night.
I'm not Black. I'm not Black. Joe Rogan's right. I'm like a caramel mocha frappuccino. This changes everything. This changes everything. The police said I'm Black.
Well, there you have it.
I want to say this as I hesitate to say it earlier. You know, early in my career, I won a contest back. I don't know if you guys remember Maxim magazine.
Of course.
Yeah, I won their Real Men of Comedy contest.
You did?
Yes, to open for Joe Rogan and Charlie Murphy.
Wow.
When they were down in Miami. Rest in peace, Charlie Murphy. And I met both of them. They were both incredible. And I remember just thinking how taken back I was at how cool Joe Rogan was and what a great guy and what a great tour it was. And, I followed his podcast for years. So did a lot of my friends of color. And I've noticed that all of us have slowly started to fall off. And I'm going to make this personal, and hopefully Joe will see this. I doubt it. But there was a point when I was at my rock bottom, and there were some people in my apartment that were just not up to snuff, probably, as you would say. And I remember being on my balcony and looking into my kitchen and saying to myself, Al, do you remember when all your friends were entertainers and scientists? I remember thinking that, having that. And I would ask Joe Rogan to have that same thought. I would ask yourself, do you remember when your friends were comics, interesting, fun people of color? And now it's Ben Shapiro that's basically on there to just tell people that Mexicans are lazy. What else does he discuss? Masturbation. Like, what happened to the fun people, the interesting people that you used to have on your podcast? It's just drilling down, drilling down, drilling down. I've had the leader of the Proud Boys on 5 times. I think we've heard enough.
What would you like Joe Rogan, if he does see this, what would you like Joe Rogan to do differently?
To not always hide behind the, hey, we just got to talk about these things and we're just putting things out there. That's the same way that people that talked about segregation did. They were like, look at the stats. It's just like both sides are better when they're separated. Being a screaming Klansman on the street, we've all realized did not work. You don't see them that much anymore. Even the people that are with that ideology, they don't go out in sheets, red-faced in Mississippi in the middle of the summertime screaming the N-word. Now they put on suits. They talk quietly, their hair slicked back, and they talk about things like inner city problems and trans rights and things to get their base to the polls. So understand, Joe, that if that's not your motive, to get people to the polls over issues that will never affect their suburban lives in any way, shape, or form. You'll never meet a trans person. You'll never actually meet a rapper. None of these things will ever affect you. These are just tools used as a prod in your back to get you to the booth to vote for the Republican Party. And that's fine. But just understand that there are other things working around you. And if that is not his intent, just understand he's being used. And if it is his intent, God bless him, it's working. So just be cognizant of what you're doing at all times, sir.
Wow. Thank you.